Hello and welcome to Soul Shift. I'm Dan. There was a time in my life where I never questioned any religious belief that I held. And then one day I did. So I want to kind of talk about the power of asking questions and the freedom that it brings. But before that, it seems that a lot of us that are in Christianity or any kind of religion, and especially the deep evangelical or fundamental, um, you do get a sense of peace and contentment when life is kind of being really shitty because it's just kind of easy to say, well, this must be God's will. Uh, I know that there were circumstances in my life um, where I was not in a good place, especially after the murder of my first partner. Um, Nothing, the way things were back then. We just had bought a house. My name was not put on it by the realtor. When he passed away, um, everything just, I had nothing. I really had nothing. Starting over was hard. I was back in college at the time. So I was really poor. And I remember thinking, as I had to walk to work because my car broke down and I couldn't afford one, and I had to walk quite a while to get to work, that this must be God's will. He must be testing me and whatever. And oddly enough, there's a kind of comfort in that because it takes all the responsibility off of you and pushes it to your deity of choice. Um, and I think we're kind of like that with the world in general. It's kind of nice for us to say, well, I know my neighbor's doing without, but I'll just say a prayer. Or I know there's starving kids in this nation. I will say a prayer. It kind of lifts responsibility off of us. And then we kind of just go, well, God has a plan. Or we tend to think that those people did something wrong. Especially with the name it and claim it kind of faith that you see out there, the prosperity nonsense that's out there. A lot of people, well, they're poor because they don't have faith, or they're poor because there's sin in their life, or they're poor because they didn't give to whatever televangelist, yammered in tongues and told them to send them a bunch of money. It's easy to lay blame. It's easy to um, justify your own actions. It's easy even when your life's shitty just to say, well, this is part of the big plan. Um, so I mean, those things kind of, in an odd way, gave you a sense of peace and almost made you feel like you had some sense of control. But underneath, there's always questions, and most people brought up in the church were taught to never ask questions. I remember I was a I was kind of a um, well-read child, I suppose, and I remember being in Sunday school um, before we went to the crazy, crazy, crazy church, and we were talking about the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel. And as a kid before school, and I'm pretty sure it was before kindergarten, or maybe I was in kindergarten, I remember when they talked about, Cain went and got his wife. I remember saying, well, if they were the only person, where'd this wife come from? And I remember my Sunday school teacher telling me, we don't question. You just don't question. And that was kind of an answer handed to you as you grew in your faith. And as you got to a church like I attended, it was considered a sin to question. So, in Church of God of Prophecy, you didn't question. It was a sin. It showed your doubt. It showed a lack of faith, and it showed God's displeasure with you. So questioning was just kind of just pushed. You would read things maybe that didn't make a lot of sense, and you just kind of Can't question this. There's a reason. I have faith. That's good. But I remember, and for those of you that watched my video before this one, as I got old and got out of the house, I did not darken the door of a church for years. My then partner uh, also was raised religious, and we were seeking that religious experience again. We did find a temporary home in the Presbyterian church, and then they turned against me when they had another pastor come in because that pastor didn't like gay people, but that's a whole different story. Um, but being gay was a huge thing for me. And that's when I really started to ask a lot of questions. Because as a child, as a teenager, raised in a strict church, had buy in, went to a Christian school, I prayed daily that God would take my life because I had these desires. I prayed continuously for God to take them away. I just kept hurtling into that depression. I figured there was something wrong with me, and my prayer was always, please, when I make a good repentance and you have forgiven me, just take my life. And that's sad. That's sad for a 15 or 16-year-old to have to pray that way. But as I got on my own, I kept thinking, well, I didn't make myself this way. And I didn't want to be this way. And why isn't God answering my prayer? I feel I have faith. I believe. So why isn't he? And I started to do a little deep dive on my own. Of course, every Christian that will see this will, in the comments that it's not true. But, you know, there are different views of sexuality. And what we look at as the clobber scriptures, I was beginning to learn that they probably didn't mean it to be so much a loving monogamous relationship or an adult relationship. That oftentimes it was tied to some kind of worship of another deity where sex was part of a fertility ritual, or it was an older man taking advantage of a younger person. And that seems to be the consensus among academic people. Then you kind of learn that the word homosexual was not even in the Bible until the 40s. That kind of was mind blowing. So I'm thinking, what else? What else was I told? Or what else was I expected to believe that's totally different? And there's freedom in asking questions. There's freedom. When you ask questions, you are developing your critical thinking. You are not afraid to look the truth in the eye. Okay. Now, that being said, when you question something that is, as far as religion, that was so strict, it does a number on you because you really go through that period of am I wrong? Am I just, because that's what people tell me, you're gay, so you just want it to be in there. And I thought that way. But then I started looking at other things like all my life, I'm going to be 58. So in my lifetime, women were not pastors, and divorce and remarriage was pretty much a sin in all churches until it was convenient for the churches to overlook that particular sin. And then you kind of just look back through time and what was a sin, you know, 20 years ago isn't a sin now. It wasn't a sin 100 years ago. The concepts of the Bible have changed. The way hell was portrayed as not a real place of fire and brimstone in Jewish literature, but kind of manifested as scriptures went along or as the church needed control. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that I questioned. Um, and I'm glad that I did, because if we don't ask the questions, we're never going to get the answers. Um, so then your beliefs kind of starts to unravel, and that's a little scary. Um, but with the unraveling of belief, you have the unraveling of community. I know for me personally, even though I stayed in a church for a while, I left the strict fundamentalist Pentecostal movement and ended up in the Episcopal Church. Um, you still lose a lot of community. So everybody I ever knew in my life, and in a small Ohio rural town especially, has some kind of a connection to belief. Um, and a lot of the people I knew were active in their belief. And so when you change the way you view things, and when you change who you are to be who you are created to be fully and openly, you get a lot of rejection. So most of the people that I went to school with in a Christian school, most of the people that were my family, most of the people in my church, they don't even speak to me. I'm non-existent, and that in and of itself, it's hard, because you're grieving that loss of community, where you used to hang out with people, you used to be friends, and now they have nothing to do with you. That's a loss. So it's a difficult process to go through. It's not for the faint-hearted. But if you want to live in total freedom and you want to live in your truth, this might be what you have to do. And to me, it just shows a couple things. It shows that I put my faith in a church or a religious belief that really doesn't love people unconditionally, because I am the condition to which they can no longer love me. And you can say, "Oh, I love the sinner," or "I love this," or "I hate the sin, love the sinner," or whatever, however they say that. If I run into these people in town, most of them won't even speak to me. So save your pious bullshit for something else. Um, and you really don't want to live by the teachings of Christ, because the dude was pretty radical for his day. I mean, everything that he taught was in complete opposition to the religious movement of his time, pretty much. Um, so there's that. Um, I'm not much for organized religion. I really have separated myself from a lot of that. I have moved into a path of meditation and mindfulness, and I seek my spiritual outlets through those kinds of things. But I'm going to tell you one thing. One thing that has helped me the most is there's so much freedom in not knowing. Okay. And what I mean by that is, do we really need all the answers for, you know, eternity? Do we really need them? Because not knowing, and not even believing in a lot of the stuff that I used to believe in, gives me the freedom and the choice to live now. Life is fleeting. I can remember being a 5-year-old kid, and now I'm close to 60. It goes quick. And if we aren't really paying attention, it's going to be gone. And we have so much life to live within each moment. And to me, that's where it is, being in awareness and being fully present in the moment. That is my church. That is something that is beautiful. Just learning to live life, not worrying about what's going to happen, in the future. I'm trying not to live in bad memories of my past. I'm trying to live in the now. And that's been so freeing for me. So freeing to um, just kind of know that I'm writing my own story. And I'm not going to worry about things like I used to. I'm in sales. My job's, you know, you never know, right? But I'm not going to fret about stuff. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be present at my job. But if things happen, I'm not going to sweat it. I can't, because I've only got one life to live. And I'm going to live it fully. I'm going to live it openly. And I'm going to be fully present to feel and experience life as it's unfolding. And I think that's what it is. I think, you know, for me, life is happening. It's not it's not doing anything to an agenda. It's just unfolding as it will. Storms happen, snow happens, the rain happens, the droughts happen, prices go up, prices go down. It's unfolding in front of us. And we've got to work with it or we're going to be miserable. And I think it's what it is. We just don't know how to walk with life. And I'm learning to do it too. It's not always easy. Those thoughts still sometimes get up in your head, but I'm learning to slow it down. I'm learning to be fully present in each moment and notice things that I never really paid attention to before. Um, like music. I love music, but just hearing every instrument as it comes through on a song, or, kind of listening to the harmony and really seeing how rich it is, and just how beautiful and how it speaks to your soul. Those are the moments that matter. Those are the moments that um, we should be living for. And that's the joy of experiencing life. So we'll get into more of this. I just wanted to let you know, please ask questions. Please do not take anything at face value. Really dig in. Really, if it doesn't make sense, ask a lot of questions. And if they tell you shouldn't ask questions, you need to run and get away from that shit. Um, Ask questions, learn, dig in, just really, really be grateful for everything that you have. Please drop a comment if this has resonated with you, or if you are somehow questioning. Would love to connect with y'all and build this community. Hit that like. Please share this video, and let's let the soul shift happen. Have a great day.